I think everybody there was moved to tears, and I thought as I came out, I thought, I just wish there was something I could do.
Whispers inside the palace have taken a sharp turn, and all eyes are suddenly on Queen Camilla. New reports claim she attempted to quietly block Princess Catherine's long-awaited return to royal duties, a move insiders call deeply unsettling. Why would Camilla interfere at such a delicate moment? What fears or motives pushed her to step into Catherine's path? Staff members say the tension grew so heavy that even senior royals began to take sides. Now the question gripping everyone is simple. What exactly is Camilla trying to stop? And why? The hidden rivalry. Camilla Parker Bowles waited her entire adult life for recognition. She lived in shadows so deep that sunlight seemed like a distant memory. For decades, the world knew her as the other woman, the one who could never measure up to a fairy tale princess with sad eyes and a magnetic smile. Diana's ghost lingered in every corridor, every photograph, every mention of the royal family. "I just want people to see me for who I am," Camilla once confided to a trusted friend during those difficult years. When Queen Elizabeth passed and Charles finally claimed his throne, Camilla believed her moment had arrived. She became Queen Consort, a title she thought would bring respect and perhaps even affection from a nation that had judged her harshly. She imagined walking through crowds without feeling their cold stares. She dreamed of reading newspapers without seeing unfavorable comparisons. Freedom, she thought, would taste sweet after such a long wait. But the palace has a way of repeating history. The freedom Camilla craved never materialized because another woman now captures the public's heart. Catherine Middleton, the Princess of Wales, moves through royal duties with natural grace that seems to require no effort at all. Her smile reaches people in ways that protocol books cannot teach. Cameras follow her movements with hungry affection, and crowds gather wherever her schedule takes her. Palace advisors notice everything. They watch polling numbers like meteorologists, studying storm patterns. During private briefings, they cannot hide the obvious truth. The public connects with Catherine immediately, one senior official noted during a strategy meeting. The numbers tell a story that makes Camilla's jaw tighten with frustration. Every charity appearance Catherine makes generates more positive coverage. Every photograph of her with the children melts hearts across the nation and beyond. Camilla sits in rooms where plans get discussed and futures get mapped. She hears how Catherine naturally projects exactly what the monarchy needs right now. Those words sting like wasps. What about sacrifice? What about patience? What about waiting decades for acceptance? Catherine walked into this life and made it look easy while Camilla fought for every scrap of approval she ever received. The resentment grows like ivy on old stone walls. Camilla watches Catherine during public events, noting how effortlessly she commands attention without seeming to try. The younger woman's elegance appears unstudied, her warmth genuine. People respond to authenticity, and Catherine possesses it in abundance. "She has a way of making everyone feel important," whispered a lady-in-waiting who had witnessed both women work a room. During walkabouts through provincial towns, Camilla catches herself studying Catherine's interactions with the crowds. The side glances come unbidden, quick flickers of observation mixed with something darker. When photographers' cameras click endlessly for Catherine while barely acknowledging Camilla's presence, the Queen Consort's smile stays frozen, but her eyes tell different stories. Behind closed doors, where courtiers gather to discuss schedules and appearances, Camilla's influence shows itself in subtle ways. She questions Catherine's choices during planning sessions. Perhaps that engagement should be reconsidered, she suggests when Catherine's calendar looks too prominent. Her comments carry weight that others must acknowledge, even when they recognize the motivation behind them. Staff members who serve both women notice the growing chill. They exchange knowing looks in hallways and speak carefully when both names arise in conversation. "There's tension," one longtime employee admitted quietly to another over tea in the servants' quarters. The rift remains unseen by public eyes, but within palace walls, everyone feels its presence like a draft through an old window. The rivalry deepens with each passing season. creating divisions where unity should exist. However, Camilla was not going to allow herself to live in another person's shadow. Camilla's attempts to weaken Catherine. The conference room on the second floor became a battleground dressed in silk and ceremony. Every Tuesday morning, senior royals gathered around an antique table to discuss upcoming initiatives and charitable ventures. Catherine arrived with carefully researched proposals, her notebook filled with ideas that could genuinely help people. But before her words could fully form in the air, Camilla's voice would cut through like scissors through ribbon. "I don't think that approach would work," the Queen Consort would announce, barely glancing at the documents Catherine presented. No explanation followed, no constructive criticism, just flat rejection that left the room uncomfortable and silent. A senior aide who witnessed these exchanges recalled feeling disturbed by the pattern. Catherine would suggest supporting mental health programs for young mothers, and Camilla would immediately pivot to something completely different, as if she hadn't heard a word. The blocking became predictable as sunrise. When Catherine proposed expanding literacy programs in rural communities, Camilla insisted the focus should shift toward agricultural heritage projects instead. When Catherine wanted to highlight modern approaches to early childhood development, Camilla pushed for traditional parenting workshops that felt decades out of touch. "It's almost comical," whispered one advisor to another after a particularly tense meeting. "She opposes things simply because Catherine suggested them." Palace insiders recognized what was happening, but protocol prevented open discussion of the conflict. The Queen Consort held rank and history on her side, even if her motivations appeared transparently personal. Catherine maintained her composure during these confrontations, though those close to her noticed the slight tightening of her shoulders, the careful control of her breathing when another idea got dismissed without consideration. Camilla's campaign expanded beyond meeting rooms into darker territory. Stories began appearing in certain newspapers, anonymous sources questioning whether Catherine possessed the stamina for demanding royal responsibilities. "She's lovely, but perhaps not strong enough for the heavier duties," one article suggested, quoting unnamed palace officials. Another piece wondered if Catherine might be overwhelmed by the increasing demands of her position. The whisper campaign backfired spectacularly. Instead of turning against Catherine, the public rallied around her with fierce protectiveness. Social media erupted with defenses of the Princess of Wales. People pointed to her tireless charity work, her genuine connections with struggling families, her ability to speak meaningfully about difficult subjects like addiction and mental illness. "Catherine has more strength in her little finger than most people have in their entire body," one supporter wrote in a post that got shared thousands of times. The leaked criticisms had fingerprints that astute observers could trace backward. Palace staff grew deeply uncomfortable as they realized where the attacks originated. Long-serving employees who had witnessed decades of royal drama found themselves disturbed by the Queen Consort's transparent jealousy. "This isn't how things should be," confided a private secretary to a colleague during a late-evening conversation. "We're supposed to present unity, not wage internal wars." Late at night, alone in her private chambers, Camilla felt history repeating itself like a curse she couldn't break. The walls seemed to whisper Diana's name, reminding her of another beautiful princess who captured hearts without effort. She had believed those days were finished, that Diana's shadow would finally fade after so many years. Instead, Catherine emerged as a new reflection of everything the public loved and Camilla could never become. The frustration consumed her thoughts during sleepless hours. Catherine's global admiration grew with each international tour, each heartfelt speech, each candid photograph showing her genuine warmth. Magazine covers featured Catherine's face with headlines celebrating her style, her compassion, her modern approach to ancient traditions. Meanwhile, Camilla's own coverage remained lukewarm at best, often focusing on her past rather than her present contributions. The Queen Consort watched Catherine's rising star with feelings that twisted inside her chest like thorns around a dying rose. The first health scare. The changes came gradually, like fog rolling across morning fields. Catherine began feeling exhausted in ways that sleep couldn't fix. Her energy drained faster than it should, leaving her struggling through afternoon engagements that once felt effortless. Those closest to her noticed the paleness creeping into her cheeks, the way she gripped chair arms a moment longer than necessary when standing. "Are you feeling all right?" her lady-in-waiting asked one morning after observing Catherine pause to steady herself. But the Princess of Wales had been raised to understand duty above discomfort. She pushed through scheduled appearances with determination that bordered on stubbornness. Royal calendars don't bend for headaches or mysterious fatigue. People depended on her presence at hospital openings, school visits, and charity galas. So Catherine concealed her declining strength behind practiced smiles and perfectly applied makeup that hid the dark circles forming beneath her eyes. The weakness followed her like an unwanted shadow. During a visit to a children's hospice, she needed to sit down twice, claiming she simply wanted to be at eye level with the young patients. At a garden party celebrating community volunteers, she leaned against a stone pillar when she thought cameras weren't watching. William noticed everything, his concern growing deeper each day. "You need to see a doctor," he insisted during a private moment between obligations. Catherine promised she would, but the calendar remained relentlessly full. The collapse happened on a Thursday afternoon during a formal meeting with Commonwealth representatives. 30 people filled an ornate room discussing environmental initiatives and cultural exchanges. Catherine sat listening to presentations, contributing thoughtful questions that demonstrated her genuine engagement with the topics. Then, without warning, the room began spinning around her like a carousel gone wild. She tried to grip the table edge, tried to call out that something was wrong, but her body had decided it could no longer continue the charade. Catherine slumped forward, unconscious before anyone could catch her fall. The scene erupted into controlled chaos. Aides rushed forward, their training kicking in despite their panic. Someone shouted for doctors while another cleared space around the fallen princess. William's face drained of color as he dropped to his knees beside his wife. "Catherine, can you hear me?" His voice cracked with fear that protocol couldn't contain. Security personnel cleared the room of guests while medical staff arrived within minutes, their equipment clattering against the marble floors. Everyone moved with urgent purpose, everyone except one person. Camilla remained frozen in her chair, her expression blank as stone. No concern crossed her features, no movement toward helping, no words of worry escaping her lips. She simply watched the commotion as if observing a mildly interesting theatrical performance. A visiting dignitary later described feeling shocked by the Queen Consort's complete lack of reaction. "It was unsettling," the official recalled. "Everyone else showed human concern, but she sat there like nothing particularly important was happening." News of Catherine's collapse spread through palace corridors faster than wildfire through dry grass. By evening, reporters gathered outside the gates, their cameras ready and questions prepared. When Camilla emerged from a side entrance hours later, they swarmed around her, microphones extended like weapons. "Your Majesty, can you comment on Princess Catherine's condition?" What came next would be discussed and analyzed for weeks. Camilla paused, adjusted her handbag, and spoke with careful precision. "Catherine has been struggling with royal life and the children for quite some time now." Her tone carried no warmth, no sympathy, just cold observation. She continued before anyone could interrupt. "She's been tired of pretending everything is perfect. The pressure finally caught up with her." The words landed like grenades in a peaceful village. Reporters exchanged stunned glances, uncertain whether they had actually heard the Queen Consort essentially blame Catherine for her own medical emergency. Social media exploded within minutes, people dissecting every word, every implication hidden within Camilla's statement. Did she seriously just suggest Catherine fainted because she can't handle being royal? one popular commentator wrote in disbelief. The backlash arrived swiftly and brutally. Public opinion turned sharply against Camilla, with many questioning why she showed such coldness toward a family member in a medical crisis. Others noted the suspicious timing and phrasing, suggesting the Queen consort was using Catherine's vulnerability to damage her reputation. "This reveals her true character," declared a longtime royal observer during a television interview. Inside palace walls, the fallout proved even more severe. Staff members who had tried to remain neutral in the growing conflict found themselves unable to defend Camilla's behavior. Her comments seemed calculated, designed to wound rather than comfort. "There's no excuse for what she said," muttered a senior courtier who had served the family for 20 years. William's fury burned white-hot behind closed doors. He confronted Camilla in a private sitting room, his usual diplomatic composure shattered completely. "How dare you speak about my wife that way while she's lying in a hospital bed?" His voice thundered through the space, making even the paintings seem to tremble. Camilla attempted to explain, to claim misunderstanding, but William's anger couldn't be soothed with excuses or political spin. The surgery and Camilla's cruel confrontation. The operating theater lights blazed bright and sterile as surgeons made their first incision. Catherine lay unconscious on the table, her life temporarily placed in the hands of skilled medical professionals who worked with quiet efficiency. The abdominal surgery required delicate precision, each movement calculated and careful. 3 hours passed while William wore a path on the waiting room floor, his mind racing through the worst possibilities despite reassurances from staff. When the lead surgeon finally emerged with news of success, the tension drained from his body so quickly he nearly collapsed. Recovery would demand months of patience and complete rest. Doctors made their instructions abundantly clear when Catherine woke from anesthesia. No royal engagements, no public appearances, no physical strain beyond gentle walking as healing progressed. Her body needed time to knit itself back together after the trauma of surgery. The incision site would ache for weeks, movements would feel restricted and uncomfortable, and pushing too hard too soon could cause serious complications. Catherine nodded her understanding through the fog of pain medication, knowing her calendar would remain empty for the foreseeable future. William transformed into a devoted guardian during those difficult early days. He refused to leave the hospital despite having comfortable beds waiting at multiple residences. Instead, he spent nights folded into an inadequate chair beside her bed, waking at her smallest sound. He helped nurses adjust pillows when Catherine couldn't find comfortable positions. He read news summaries aloud when screens hurt her eyes. He advocated with doctors about pain management and ensured every medical need received immediate attention. His love showed itself in 1,000 small actions that spoke louder than any grand romantic gesture. The initial days blurred together in a haze of medication schedules and vital sign checks. Catherine drifted between sleep and wakefulness, her body demanding rest, while her mind struggled against the forced inactivity. She had never been good at sitting still, at letting others handle responsibilities she felt were hers to bear. But surgery leaves no room for stubbornness. Her body simply wouldn't cooperate with any attempts to rush the healing process. Even sitting upright brought sharp reminders that recovery follows its own timeline, regardless of royal schedules or personal determination. Visitors came and went with flowers and well wishes. Family members stopped by with concern etched on their faces. Friends sent cards decorated with cheerful messages. The public followed news of her recovery with genuine worry, sending thousands of letters hoping for her swift return to health. But one visitor arrived without flowers, without warm wishes, without any trace of familial compassion. Camilla appeared at the hospital room door on the 8th day after surgery. She came alone, having deliberately dismissed her security detail and personal attendants. Her expression carried no softness, no concern for the woman lying pale and weak in the hospital bed. William's protective instincts flared immediately, but Catherine indicated she would accept the visit. He left reluctantly, throwing worried glances backward as he stepped into the corridor. The Queen Consort wasted no time on pleasantries or gentle conversation. She stood near the window with afternoon light creating harsh shadows across her features. Her words landed like stones thrown at glass. She suggested that perhaps Catherine should consider returning her titles if royal duties proved too demanding. She questioned whether someone who required such extensive recovery possessed the strength necessary for the position. The criticism flowed cold and calculated, designed to wound someone already vulnerable. Catherine felt a shock ripple through her medication-dulled mind. She had expected awkwardness, perhaps, or uncomfortable small talk, but not this deliberate cruelty. Not attacks delivered to someone lying in a hospital bed recovering from surgery. The words hurt worse than the surgical incision, cutting into emotional places that physical pain couldn't reach. Yet even in weakness, Catherine maintained the grace that defined her character. She responded quietly that any person would need proper healing time after major surgery, that rushing recovery served no one. Camilla showed no remorse for the harshness of her statements. Her face remained expressionless, unmoved by the pain clearly visible in Catherine's eyes. She offered no apology, no softening of her position, no acknowledgement that her timing and tone crossed every boundary of decent behavior. Instead, she adjusted her handbag with deliberate slowness and moved toward the door. Her departure came abruptly, without farewell or backward glance. The sound of her footsteps fading down the corridor seemed to echo the coldness she had brought into that room. William returned to find his wife crying silently, tears sliding down her pale cheeks onto the hospital pillow. When Catherine explained what had transpired, his anger became almost tangible in the small space. He left immediately to confront Camilla, his usual diplomatic composure completely shattered by protective fury. His footsteps thundered down the same corridor she had just walked, determination driving every stride. News of the confrontation spread through palace networks with remarkable speed. Staff members who had maintained careful neutrality in the ongoing tension found themselves unable to remain silent. Kitchen workers discussed it during meal preparations. Housekeepers whispered about it while changing linens in empty rooms. Security guards exchanged knowing looks when Camilla passed through hallways. The incident became an open secret that everyone knew, but nobody officially acknowledged. Several aides who had previously served the Queen Consort began requesting transfers to other departments. They found reasons to avoid assignments that would place them in her direct service. Long-serving employees who had weathered decades of royal drama expressed private horror at what had occurred. Attacking someone recovering from surgery seemed beyond the pale, a violation of basic human decency that professional loyalty couldn't excuse or overlook. The palace itself seemed to develop a new atmosphere in the weeks following the hospital visit. Camilla walked through rooms that felt subtly colder, past staff members whose eyes didn't quite meet hers. Conversations stopped when she entered spaces, resuming only after she departed. The distance wasn't dramatic or obvious, but it existed nonetheless. Trust, once broken in such spectacular fashion, proves difficult to restore even within the formal structures of royal service. Catherine's decline and cancer diagnosis. The hospital discharge papers came with strict warnings about gradual return to normal activities. Doctors emphasized the importance of complete recovery before resuming any stressful obligations. Catherine listened and nodded, genuinely intending to follow their guidance. But 3 weeks into her recovery, restlessness began gnawing at her conscience. She watched news coverage of charities struggling without royal patronage visits. She read letters from organizations hoping for her appearance at upcoming events. The weight of responsibility pulled at her even as her body still mended. Against medical advice and William's strong objections, Catherine decided to return to limited duties. She convinced herself that a few carefully selected engagements wouldn't cause harm. Just small events, she reasoned, nothing too physically demanding. A brief school visit here, a short charity reception there. The public needed reassurance that their beloved princess was healing well. Her absence had created worry across the nation, and Catherine hated causing concern. So she applied makeup to hide her pallor, chose outfits that disguised her weight loss, and practiced her smile until it looked natural again. The first appearance seemed to go smoothly. Catherine visited a children's hospital where young patients greeted her with handmade cards and shy smiles. She knelt beside beds despite the pulling sensation at her surgical site. She laughed at their jokes and listened to their stories with genuine attention. Photographers captured images of her looking radiant and healthy, exactly the reassurance she hoped to provide. News outlets celebrated her return with headlines praising her dedication and strength. But appearances can deceive even the person creating them. Behind the careful facade, Catherine's body was sending increasingly urgent warning signals. The fatigue that had plagued her before surgery returned with brutal intensity. Simple tasks left her exhausted for hours afterward. She developed persistent pain in her abdomen that differed from normal surgical recovery discomfort. Night sweats soaked through her nightgowns, forcing her to change clothes in the dark while William slept. She dismissed these symptoms as remnants of her operation, telling herself they would fade with time. 2 more public engagements followed that first hospital visit. Catherine attended a garden party supporting environmental initiatives, standing for 90 minutes while making polite conversation with donors and activists. She spoke at a conference about early childhood education, delivering a 15-minute address that required 3 private rest breaks beforehand. To observers, she appeared slightly thinner, but otherwise healthy. Only those closest to her noticed how she gripped podiums for support, how her smile occasionally faltered when she thought cameras weren't watching. William saw everything his wife tried to hide. He noticed how she needed help getting dressed in the mornings. He heard her sharp intakes of breath when moving too quickly. He found her sitting on the shower floor one morning, too weak to stand under the water. His worry transformed into insistence during a tense breakfast conversation. Medical professionals needed to examine her again. Something was clearly wrong beyond normal recovery struggles. Catherine initially resisted, not wanting to appear weak or overly cautious. But William's concern eventually overcame her stubbornness. The hospital tests began with routine blood work that showed concerning abnormalities. Doctors ordered additional scans, their expressions growing more serious as results appeared on computer screens. Catherine underwent a biopsy that required another procedure, more anesthesia, more waiting for answers that nobody wanted to hear. William held her hand through every test, his own fear carefully controlled, but visible in the tension of his jaw and the darkness under his eyes. The diagnosis arrived on a gray Tuesday afternoon that Catherine would remember for the rest of her life. The oncologist entered the consultation room with a face that revealed bad news before any words were spoken. Cancer had been discovered during the examination of tissue removed during her recent biopsy. The specific type required immediate treatment to prevent further spread. Chemotherapy would need to begin within 2 weeks, followed by additional interventions depending on how her body responded to the initial treatment. Catherine felt the world tilt sideways as the doctor's words washed over her. Cancer. The word carried weight that crushed normal thoughts into fragments. She was only 42 years old with 3 children who needed their mother. She had decades of work still to accomplish, causes that depended on her advocacy, people who relied on her support. How could her body betray her so completely? William's hand tightened around hers, an anchor in the storm of terrible information flooding the small room. The chemotherapy schedule would demand months of her life. Treatment sessions would occur every 3 weeks, each one leaving her sick and weak for days afterward. Hair loss was virtually certain. Her immune system would become compromised, requiring isolation from public spaces and even limiting contact with her own children during vulnerable periods. The oncologist explained everything with professional compassion. But the facts remained brutally unchanged, regardless of gentle delivery. Returning to public duties became impossible under these circumstances. Catherine's health required complete priority over any royal obligations. The decision to step back from official engagements came with surprising relief, mixed with profound sadness. She wanted to continue serving, but she also desperately wanted to live to see her children grow up. Treatment offered the best chance of survival, and treatment demanded her full attention and energy. The palace communications team worked carefully on the public statement. Every word required consideration of multiple audiences and potential interpretations. They needed to inform the public honestly while maintaining appropriate privacy around medical details. The statement acknowledged that Catherine had been diagnosed with cancer and would be undergoing preventative chemotherapy. It requested privacy for the family during this difficult time while expressing gratitude for the public's ongoing support and understanding. The announcement hit the nation like an earthquake. News outlets interrupted regular programming to share the statement. Social media exploded with shock and sympathy from millions of people who had watched Catherine grow into her royal role. Flowers began arriving at palace gates within hours, creating mountains of bouquets left by strangers who felt personal connection to the princess they had never met. Churches across the country added Catherine to their prayer lists. The outpouring of love and concern came from every corner of society. Catherine read some of the messages during her first chemotherapy session. Nurses had set her up in a private room with comfortable chairs and warm blankets. The IV dripped medication into her veins while William sat beside her, refusing to be anywhere else. She scrolled through hundreds of supportive comments from ordinary people sharing their own cancer battles, offering advice and encouragement, promising to hold her in their thoughts. Their kindness brought tears to her eyes, a reminder that she didn't face this fight alone. The first treatment left her violently ill for 3 days. She couldn't keep food down, couldn't summon energy to leave her bed, couldn't do anything except endure the misery that came with poison designed to kill cancer cells. William stayed close, holding her hair during bouts of nausea, bringing ice chips when her mouth felt too dry, reading to her when television screens seemed too bright. The children visited briefly when she felt strong enough, their worried faces making her heart ache worse than any physical symptom. However, this diagnosis just gave Camilla another chance to weaken Catherine. Camilla's most heartless moment. The chemotherapy had stolen Catherine's strength along with her hair. She lay in her private rooms wearing a soft scarf wrapped around her head, her skin pale as winter snow against the cream-colored pillows. Nausea came in waves that left her trembling and exhausted. Even lifting her head required effort that seemed monumental. William had stepped out briefly to handle urgent matters, leaving Catherine alone for the first time in days. She closed her eyes, trying to find comfort in the silence. The door opened without warning or courtesy. Camilla entered with the presence of someone who believed every space belonged to her by right. She carried no flowers, no comforting words, no gentle sympathy for a woman fighting cancer. Instead, her face wore an expression of bitter complaint that made the temperature in the room seem to drop. Catherine struggled to sit up straighter, managing only a partial rise against her pillows. What followed proved more painful than any chemotherapy session. Camilla launched into grievances without preamble or consideration for Catherine's fragile state. She spoke of burdens dumped unfairly on her shoulders because Catherine had become unavailable. Royal duties now fell to her in greater numbers, she complained. As if cancer were an inconvenience Catherine had chosen specifically to create more work for others. Her voice carried sharp edges that cut through the quiet room. The complaints continued relentlessly. Camilla declared that everyone else handling royal responsibilities was completely incompetent. She suggested that Catherine's absence had exposed how poorly the family functioned without proper leadership. The implication hung heavy in the air that Camilla considered herself the only capable person left standing. She paced near the windows while delivering her litany of frustrations. never once asking how Catherine felt or whether treatment was helping. Then came words so cruel they seemed to suck oxygen from the room. Camilla turned to face Catherine directly and stated flatly that she didn't deserve anything the royal family had given her. The titles, the position, the public affection, none of it was earned or warranted. Perhaps, Camilla suggested with cold calculation, Catherine should consider giving up her titles entirely. After all, someone too weak to fulfill duties had no business holding such important positions within the monarchy. Catherine felt something break inside her chest that had nothing to do with cancer. She was fighting for her life against a disease that killed thousands every year. She was enduring treatments that left her so sick she could barely function. She was terrified of leaving her children motherless while trying to maintain hope that medicine would save her. And here stood a woman who should have offered comfort or at least basic human decency, instead delivering attacks designed to wound someone already bleeding. Tears began sliding down Catherine's hollow cheeks without permission. She had no strength left to argue, no energy to defend herself against such baseless cruelty. Catherine could not speak. Her mind wanted to form answers, but her voice refused to work. She only cried quietly while Camilla continued talking about her weakness and failures. Camilla did not stop, did not soften, and did not show even a small sign of care. She acted as if Catherine's tears meant nothing. When she finished saying everything she came to say, Camilla simply turned and walked out. She did not say goodbye or even look back. She left with the confidence of someone who believed she had spoken honest truths, not hurtful cruelty. The moment the door closed, Catherine stayed on the bed, crying softly. The room felt heavy and cold. When William returned, he found her in tears and rushed to her side. He held her carefully and asked again and again what had happened. In broken sentences, Catherine told him what Camilla had said. William's face changed immediately, his hands shook, and his anger grew with every word. William left Catherine with her ladies-in-waiting and went to find Camilla. He found her in the hallway, calmly speaking with an aide, acting as if nothing serious had happened. William dismissed the aide at once and confronted her. He asked how she could speak so harshly to someone who was fighting an illness. Camilla showed no regret. She said that Catherine's condition did not change anything. There were duties to be done, and anyone who was too weak did not deserve to hold a high role. Then she said the words that broke the last bit of peace between them. She told William he had married the wrong person. She said Catherine was not strong enough for royal life. Something inside William snapped. Years of hurt and unspoken anger rose to the surface. He told Camilla that she had never been accepted by the public, that she could never replace his mother, no matter what she did. He reminded her of her past and how much damage it had caused. Camilla grew angry and tried to defend herself, but William refused to let her twist the past. Their voices rose so loudly that staff nearby heard every word. William ended the argument by warning her never to speak to Catherine that way again. If she did, she would lose every connection within the family. Camilla walked away without apologizing, leaving the palace in deep tension. Staff quietly chose sides and most supported Catherine and William. Camilla became more and more isolated as people around her pulled away. Despite this confrontation, Camilla was not willing to back down. Catherine's recovery and Camilla's final sabotage. Catherine's return to strength began with tiny steps that few noticed at first. After many long months of treatment, her body slowly started responding with new energy. Each morning, she pushed herself a little more, guided by doctors and supported by gentle encouragement from William. Her color improved, and her voice grew steadier each day. Staff who had watched over her for so long whispered to one another that she looked brighter than she had in a very long time. Even on quiet days, she showed a determination that made people admire her even more. Plans for her return to light duties were soon prepared, with care taken to ensure she would not be overwhelmed. Advisors discussed short visits, soft engagements, and limited appearances, all arranged to make her transition safe and calm. For Catherine, It was not only a return to work, but a return to purpose, and she welcomed the thought with hope. While Catherine's strength grew, another force in the palace began to harden. Camilla listened to the news of Catherine's slow comeback with a thin, tight expression. She made no effort to hide her irritation. When advisors mentioned possible dates for Catherine's first public role, Camilla responded sharply, saying Catherine isn't deserving and should stay out permanently. Her voice carried a crisp finality that silenced the room. She believed that Catherine's absence had made space for her, and she did not want that space taken from her again. Instead of allowing the plans to move forward, she used her position to interfere with every detail. She delayed schedules by claiming times were unsuitable. She returned documents with notes saying they needed further review. Approvals that normally took hours suddenly took days. Advisors found themselves trapped between two powerful forces, unsure how to move without creating more conflict. Camilla continued with cold ease, confident that no one would dare question her authority. The quiet resistance could not stay hidden forever. William began noticing repeated delays that made little sense. He heard the same excuses from different voices, all sounding rehearsed. His patience, stretched thin for so long, finally reached its breaking point. One afternoon, after hearing that another planned date for Catherine's return had been denied, he requested a private meeting with Camilla. She arrived with calm confidence, greeting him as though everything in the palace was functioning perfectly. William's expression did not change. He stood stiffly, his jaw tight, and asked her directly why she was blocking Catherine's return. Camilla simply folded her hands and replied that she was doing what she thought was best. William pressed harder, accusing her of cruelty and asking how she could act this way toward someone who had fought through such a difficult illness. Her reply was brief and cold. She insisted that duty came first and that Catherine was not ready to return. William stepped closer, his voice quiet but sharp, telling her she had crossed a line and that Catherine had every right to serve again. The confrontation filled the air with tension so heavy that even the walls seemed to hold their breath. Camilla refused to soften her view, claiming she had made the correct decision. William looked at her with disbelief, unable to understand how she could speak so calmly about something that cut so deeply. He told her that she had shown disrespect not only to Catherine but to the entire family. His words struck hard, and for the first time, Camilla's expression shifted with a hint of irritation. Yet she still refused to take responsibility. William ended the meeting by saying he would no longer allow anyone to stand in the way of Catherine's return. Then he left her standing there, her confidence shaken but not broken, her frustration rising beneath her composed face. It did not take long for the rest of the family to hear about the growing conflict. The palace, already strained by months of worry over Catherine, now found itself caught in a new storm. Senior royals, many of whom had watched Catherine work tirelessly for years, reacted with shock and disappointment when they learned of Camilla's efforts to block her. In a quiet room deep within the palace, a gathering was held to discuss the matter. The tone of the meeting was unusually firm. One senior royal, known for calm judgment, stated that Camilla's behavior showed a level of insensitivity that could not be ignored. Another added that a line had been crossed, saying plainly that she had overstepped. These words carried great weight in the palace, especially coming from figures who rarely spoke with such seriousness. As more voices joined in, the room shifted from quiet concern to firm agreement. They spoke about Catherine's long record of service. They remembered her kindness to families, her gentle manner with children, and her steady presence beside William through every challenge. Her willingness to return to duties even after a long struggle only increased their respect for her. They made it clear that she had earned her place, not through titles, but through genuine work. Many insisted that blocking her comeback would harm the family far more than helping it. Their message was simple but strong. Catherine deserved full support. These discussions soon made their way through the palace halls, carried by advisors and staff who were quietly relieved to hear powerful voices defending Catherine. The atmosphere changed as many realized that Camilla's actions had caused deeper fractures than she expected. Staff who once obeyed her without hesitation now approached her with careful politeness. Words were chosen more cautiously around her. Conversations faded when she entered rooms. She felt the shift, but refused to admit her role in creating it. Meanwhile, Catherine remained unaware of the full tension building around her. William shielded her from anything that might affect her recovery, sharing only small, gentle updates. Catherine continued her slow progress, taking short walks, sitting near windows to feel sunlight on her face, and practicing standing for longer periods. When she learned that plans for her return were being prepared again, her eyes brightened. She said quietly that she hoped to help in any way she could. Her soft determination became a steady light in the palace, and many staff members felt their spirits lift whenever they saw her trying her best. As the day for her gentle return approached, the palace regained a sense of direction. Meetings were held with full support from senior royals, and schedules were finalized without interference. Advisors worked with renewed confidence, knowing the family stood behind Catherine. William stayed close, ensuring every detail was handled with care. When Catherine finally walked into the prepared room to review her first event, she stood tall, her posture graceful and calm. Though still recovering, she carried herself with quiet pride. Camilla watched the preparations from a distance, seeing her influence slip away. The corridors felt colder around her, and the glances she once ignored now felt sharper. She understood that the family had closed ranks around Catherine, leaving her alone in a space that once felt secure. Her attempts to stop Catherine had not only failed, they had changed the way the palace looked at her. When Catherine finally returned to public duty, the cheers that rose from the crowd outside were warm and full of relief. She smiled softly, grateful for every voice that called her name. Behind her, hidden from cameras but not from truth, Camilla stood motionless, her expression unreadable. The moment marked a turning point, one that made it clear that Catherine's strength had carried her forward, while Camilla's actions had pushed her into growing isolation.